Good morning, friends. Feels like it's been a little while since I've had the honour of sharing with you in this way. Really looking forward to this morning. We've got a cracker of a passage to interact with. But before we get to that, just to say a little word about our theme this month. We're continuing to journey through the lectionary as we have been. And it's interesting, when you get to October and we look at the readings that are there, there is a thread that I think goes through all of the readings as a whole, and that is the theme of surprise. There's just lots of stuff that's unexpected. And I think the invitation to us is to get in touch with that in our own lives. Often we have a way of getting really settled in a groove, of having a set of expectations, and we just kind of roll along. And sometimes that can extend to God, can extend to our faith as well, that we're just not easily surprised anymore. And we often don't put ourselves in places where we're open to being surprised. And so last week there was a kind of a thread through the readings of small things and being surprised when God uses small things in great ways. This week, the thread is this idea of unexpected places, strange places, often where God does God's best work. And as I share a little bit similar way to way Ken shared, I'm going to share about 3 amazing days that I had overseas that changed my life in quite a profound way. I want to encourage you to think about your meandering journey, how you've journeyed through your life, and what have been the places where you've met God in a new way. I actually was really impacted by Nat's prayer just before, praying that often this world is confusing and often this world is overwhelming. And it may be there have been some spaces in your life where that's been your experience. And it may be that right now you're in one of those seasons where there's a particular situation, a particular aspect of your life where you're going, I wasn't expecting that. I just encourage you to lean into that space as we journey this morning. My sense is that God's wanting to prompt us about some of the things, some of the threads in our lives. The psalm set down for today is Psalm 66, and without going through that whole reading, because we're going to focus in on Jeremiah this morning, the punchline, the final verse in this reading is, as the people of God were reflecting on their journey and how they've been led by God, they summed it up by saying, we went through fire and water, but you brought us to a place of abundance. And I have a hope on the horizon that I'll end up in that place of abundance, but sometimes there's these meandering journeys which aren't always going to plan. I want to share with you about the first overseas trip I had. I went to the US in 2008. It was actually this time 17 years ago. I was in a little place called Atlanta in the southern state of Georgia in the US. And I was completely oblivious to a lot of the realities going on at the time. It was only a couple of weeks before the election, and there were a lot of very excited African American people because Obama was doing well in the polls. But it's also a very interesting place because deep down in the South, it's Republican territory. And so there was a lot of American flags everywhere I went. There was a lot of kind of fervour around. And the first day I was in Atlanta, there was a kind of Moomba type festival going on. And I felt particularly comfortable because Melbourne, we know how to do Moomba, and it felt very similar to that. I was walking down the main street of Atlanta and there were lots of stalls everywhere and there was stuff happening everywhere. And I just got more and more intrigued as I walked down this street and heading down the hill into some of the unusual sounds and smells and sights going on. And as I was getting down towards the bottom of the street, I became aware of some new smells and new things being cooked. And it seems that in the Deep South, they deep fry everything, not just chicken, but pickles, whatever you can find, it goes in. And it's quite an interesting place. But there was this moment where I became particularly interested in these large metal bins with fire in them, and they were cooking something, and I was wanting to get a better view of what was going on, and I ventured further and further down and realised they were cooking massive turkey legs on these bins. And I was so oblivious to everything else going on around me, it took me a while to realise that I was the only white person standing in the middle of this street. And at some point coming down the hill, there was this imaginary line where the kind of white part of Atlanta stopped and the African American part of Atlanta started. And I still remember the feeling today of feeling so conspicuous, so out of place. And I think maybe because of all the political stuff going on, there was a lot of mistrust. And some of the looks that I received, it's like, I really shouldn't be here. And it was like, reverse out and just get out of there as quickly as I could. And that was my first day in Atlanta, the Saturday. The next day, my plan was to go and visit Martin Luther King's church, Ebenezer Baptist Church. And so with that first experience in the back of my mind, I was a little bit anxious, a little bit cautious as I stepped into this space, because once again, it was predominantly an African American context. 80 or 90% of the congregation were black. But I was encouraged that the other 10, 15% were rainbow people of God like me. And I felt a little more at home there, even though I was a little bit cautious. And I very much had the experience of day one of Atlanta of I wasn't expecting that, and it was happening again on day two, because as I walked into the church, everybody, and I mean everybody, was in their Sunday best. And I've never seen so many hats, so many beautiful suits, immaculately dressed people, and once again I felt a bit conspicuous. At least I had a collared shirt on, which was a start. And there were lots of things that immediately impress you. There is like 60 or 70 people in a choir behind where the preaching happens. And the music was sensational, and I was kind of expecting that. But there were three, I think, moments in the service where it just kind of took my breath away. The first one was the offering. One of the favourite sons of this community was welcomed back, and I don't actually know his name, but he was a world-class trumpet player. And this big, beautiful African-American guy just waltzes out, and I've never seen so much gold on somebody in my life. Gold rings on every finger, gold chains hanging off him. And he had this gold trumpet. And to top it off, he was wearing an apricot suit. As though it was the most natural thing in the world and he could get away with it. And the offering was happening and he was just wailing away on this trumpet. And I thought, oh my goodness, everything is being served today. From deep lament through to incredible joy. And it was just like, okay, strap on in and enjoy this. And then after the offering, the second moment that really stood out to me was the preaching. And in this particular image, it's actually Joe Biden speaking. This is the one that comes up on Wikipedia when you Google Ebenezer Baptist Church. And they're renowned for having world-class speakers at this church because it has this heritage of preaching from Martin Luther King onwards. But the day that I went was a no-name woman from the local community. And when she got up to speak, she was clearly nervous because she's standing in this space, which is so revered. And there was almost a sense in the community of, I hope this goes well. And she started, and she wasn't that confident. And I thought, oh, I wonder how this is going to go. But then she started to find her groove, and I hear this woman in front of me going, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then I hear this deep voice behind me going, preach. Preach it, sister, preach. And this murmur starts. And it's like, whoa, she's in second gear now. And she's going and it just starts unfolding. And I realise this is an event. And the whole community is fanning into flame. What's been given here? And then I knew third gear had started because you hear this as the guy on the organ is starting to do his thing and he's in the little pit behind where she's speaking. And then long story short, by the end of this sermon, there are multiple pastors who sit on the seats there. They're standing on their seats waving their jackets. That's how it ended. And I'm just thinking, this service can't get any better. But I've got to say that the moment that stays with me and probably choked me up a little bit like Ken before was something so simple. The passing of the peace. One of the things you'll notice is at the front here there is so much space. And right around the church there is so much space. It's like it's got a veranda inside. And when it came time for passing of the peace, I was just kind of sitting there on my hands, feeling a bit conspicuous. And then I realised, oh, this isn't just a notional thing. Everybody was up out of their seats. They're all mingling around. And I noticed that how every visitor had people who were intentionally coming over and welcoming them. And there was this, I don't know how else to say it, a big black mama with ample bosom who came over to me and just said, is it okay if I give you a hug? And before I said yes, it was just like, I was enveloped. And it just went from there. And this thing went for like 10 minutes. It wasn't just a ticker box thing. It was something that I least expected. But the moment that still gets me is this immaculately dressed boy, an African-American boy. I reckon he would have been 10, 11 years old. He comes up to me and he looks in my eye and he says, the peace of the Lord be with you. Welcome, sir. You are welcome in this place. And I don't know whether he knew my experience the day before, but he spoke into my life. And I've never felt so welcome, so at home somewhere, because it was so genuine. And I was just in this state of, how does a community end up like this? How can this be so different to the day before and still be in the very same city where there's all this confusion, contradiction, all around colour, class, education, all the things that can divide us. There was something special happening in this place. And as I got chatting with people afterwards, I was told, if you want to understand Dr. King, Martin Luther King, if you want to understand Dr. King and his legacy, go on the tour, go to his bedroom and look out the window, and then maybe you'll understand. And so that's what I did. Day 3 in Atlanta, this journey that I'm on, I went and visited the birthplace of Martin Luther King. And if you want to play along at home, it's actually quite fun to use Google Maps and do a rotation, because what I'm about to tell you, you can actually look at for yourself. But this tiny little house is at the end of a T intersection. So there's a street that's facing their house. And their tiny little house has a veranda at the bottom, and then you'll see that there's 2 big windows at the top. That's Martin Luther King's bedroom that he's sharing with his siblings. They're all kind of crammed in. And when you go into the house and you look out the window, you're standing there looking straight up a street. And on the right-hand side, it's working class. All the houses crammed in together. No big nature strip. It's all just kind of crammed in. And on the other side, when I played the game yesterday and looked at Google Earth and did the 360 rotation, you can't even see the houses on the left-hand side because the properties are so deep, the gardens are so deep, the size of the blocks are so huge. And so every morning, as Martin Luther King got ready for school, he would look down this street and he would see the division. He would see the classes, and he actually became a product. He actually became a bridge because he had friends on both sides of the street. He became a very educated, very eloquent young man. And he had friends on both sides of the street. And I think it's probably helpful for us to imagine what went on their veranda. Martin Luther King's dad was the minister at Ebenezer Baptist Church, the church that I visited the day before. And they sought to be a community of peace. They sought to be a community of shalom, seeking to be peacemakers. And so with this experience in the back of my mind, I can't read Jeremiah without thinking of Martin Luther King nowadays, because he was so steeped in the prophets. And I think God apprenticed him, shaped him to be a kind of prophet in our day. And so when we dive into the book of Jeremiah, he's known as the weeping prophet. He had one of the toughest gigs going. The first part of his ministry was to say to God's people, despite everything else you're hearing and what the other prophets are telling you, I am telling you that we are right on the edge of catastrophe here. We're not listening to God. We're not being faithful. And yet the people were overconfident that we're God's chosen people. We're in the promised land, like they've got this absolute, almost sense of entitlement. And Jeremiah is speaking into that. And he says in Jeremiah chapter 6, this is what the Lord is saying to you, if you have ears to hear. Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths where the good way is and walk in it, and you'll find rest for your souls. And when I hear this passage and the intentionality of standing at the place of decision, and notice the 5 verbs: stand, look, ask, walk, rest. There is walking involved, but it's the 4th verb: standing, looking, asking. And as I imagine Martin Luther King looking out his window each morning, I think he was shaped by verses like this, where he's called to stand at this intersection, stand at the spaces where there's dialogue, maybe confusion. And for us in our lives, we're called to that. We're called to stand in the conversation that God has for us, and to keep looking, to keep asking, and to walk in a way that leads to rest. I wonder whether it's because of verses like Jeremiah's verse and because of his upbringing that Martin Luther King was known to say things like this: the ultimate measure of a person is not where they stand in moments of comfort and convenience, but where they stand in times of challenge and controversy. Unlike Martin Luther King, the absolute tragedy for Jeremiah, the weeping prophet, is how Jeremiah 6:16, the verse that I've shown you, how it ends. But you said, we will not walk in it. Can you imagine the tragedy for Jeremiah, having a very deep sense of what's about to happen, like a slow-moving car crash, and he can't do anything about it? He's being faithful to his ministry over years, and he can't stop it happening. And then the last part of Jeremiah's book is actually the aftermath of Babylon coming, taking them into captivity. And that's our verse for today. That's the reading that Nat read for us today. It's addressed to the people that have been carried into exile. And I just wanted you to notice the grace in that first phrase that I've highlighted, to all those I carried into exile. On one level, it was all self-inflicted. And they were bullied and they were taken into exile by a foreign power. But in another way of seeing it, God refuses to give up on his people, and even in those moments he's still present, still with. And maybe that's been our experience too. I know that I've had some self-inflicted moments in my life, and God has still been faithful. But getting back to our theme of I wasn't expecting that, the last thing that I would expect to read, to hear from Jeremiah, who's known for saying things that were surprising and people found hard to believe, is these words: build houses, settle down, plant gardens, marry and have children. What are you talking about, Jeremiah? These are our enemies. These are the people who have beaten us up, who've made us slaves. How can we have that posture in this space? Wasn't expecting that. And Jeremiah goes on to say, increase in number, seek peace and prosperity. Seek the peace and prosperity of the city for which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. And I think this kind of posture is what really touched me at Ebenezer Baptist, and what inspires me in the ministry of somebody like Martin Luther King Jr. is he was in a second choice world where he was spat upon, he was called names, his life was threatened. But God had given him a dream. And he refused to retaliate with violence. He was known to be a person of peace, engaging in peace marches. And he says, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the colour of their skin, but by the content of their character. And he spoke hope, he spoke vision, he spoke peace. I became a Christian when I was 15 years old. And up until that point in time, pretty much no one had ever written me a letter before. But I remember in the first couple of years of being a Christian, multiple leaders and friends wrote me letters to encourage me. And time and again, the little verse at the bottom that they would quote is the verse that we're kind of land on today. And I had never really appreciated the context for these beautiful words, because they were kind of just plucked out as this lovely blessing. And they were a lovely blessing to me. But it says, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. Incredibly beautiful words, but they're in this very same chapter. And I think if you were to have an envelope around them, who they're addressed to, it would be something like this. They're addressed to you. but they're addressed to you, particularly in the spaces and the places that aren't going to plan. They're addressed to you in exile. And I've put in brackets, there was a moment on Friday afternoon. I've spoken a bit about my mum and how she doesn't remember me anymore, but my dad's also struggling a lot. And on Friday afternoon, I had to put my dad's socks and shoes on for the first time because he can't do that anymore. And I'm kneeling down on the floor, and this is what comes to mind. In the most tender of times, the least predicted of places, that's where this promise finds us. Friends, I've said enough, but I do want to help us build a bridge to communion and to our final song to finish the service. And I just love one of the songs. I've been sitting with it all week. One of the songs that the team have chosen is a song called Blessed Be Your Name. And I love it because it's holding the both and of faith. And it starts off like a lot of other praise songs, Lord, blessed be your name. In the land that is plentiful, where your streams of abundance flow, blessed be your name. And that's good and it's right to praise God when everything's going well. But this song isn't done. The second half of the first verse goes on to say, blessed be your name. Even when I'm found in the desert place, even when I'm in the unexpected place, though I walk through the wilderness, blessed be your name. And it's inviting us into this space. As we sing this final song, are we willing to lean into this space? Lord, blessed be your name, regardless of what's happening. Every blessing you pour out, I'll turn back to praise. Even when the darkness closes in, Lord, still I will say, blessed be your name. And the song continues in a similar vein in the second verse as well. Blessed be your name. When the sun's shining down on me and the world's all as it should be, blessed be your name. And then once again it invites us. Blessed be your name, Lord. On the road marked with suffering, though there's pain in the offering, blessed be your name. But it's the bridge this morning that I invite us to linger with for a little while. This is actually a verse of Scripture. Job chapter 1 verse 21. If you want to look it up, it talks about how naked I came and naked I'll leave. Lord, you give and take away, but still I will choose to say, blessed be your name. And as we come to a time of communion, I invite us not to rush this morning. And I invite us to remember how Jesus shared bread and shared the cup all through his ministry. Because if you look closely, he used the same 4 words every time he did it. Whether it's the feeding of the 5,000, whether it's the Last Supper, whether it's after the resurrection, like on the road to Emmaus, we are told that Jesus took. First verb, he took bread. The second one is he blessed it. The third verb is he broke it. And then the fourth verb is he gave it. Take, bless, break, give. And in this bridge, we have 3 of those 4. Lord, you give and you take away. My heart will choose to say, blessed be your name. Blessed be your name. And so this morning, my invitation is, before you even open this, I invite you to imagine the envelope that it's coming in to you today. Where is your address? Where is this symbol of Jesus' presence where is this coming to you today? Where is it finding you? Maybe you are in the place where the world is as it should be. The sun's shining down on you. That's wonderful. Thank God for that. But it might be that the world is confusing and overwhelming. It might be that there is a second choice element in your life today. I just invite you to sit with that. And we're told that Jesus is the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world and who gives grace. Jesus takes and gives. But this isn't just about giving and taking, it's also about blessing and breaking. And it may be that this symbol today and partaking in this today is a form of blessing for you. And God's going to want to touch you and affirm you in some way. Or it might be that God is wanting to give you courage for something. I know for me that's the space I'm in. God's breaking me open in different ways and I need courage for that. And so without any more words, I'm just going to invite Dave and Darren just to start playing the final song that we're going to sing today, Blessed Be Your Name. And I just encourage you into a space of just sitting with Jesus. And maybe as you take this and break it open, say a little blessing and receive it as a symbol of Jesus meeting you today.